So hey everybody, we're going to take a look at topic 3.12. This is about the movement of people in the early republic. Specifically, we're going to look at how and why migration and immigration in North America is going to cause competition and conflict over time. The competition really comes into, well, the conflict comes into like one of four categories. The United States versus a couple of European forces, the United States against Native American peoples that are scattered around throughout the western part of the United States at that point. And as more Western migration happens, we'll see the origins of the North versus South conflict over the expansion of slavery. Here we go. So as U.S. settlers continue their migration further to the west, one of the initial issues that needs to be resolved has got to do with diplomatic conflicts between the United States and European forces that are still in the North American continent. So first off, when you're talking about the British occupation in the West, there have been, since the colonial days, British military forts that have been out in the old Northwest Territory. This occupation in the West did not end during the 1780s after the Revolutionary War, and as a matter of fact, it has not ended now that you're in the 1790s under the new federal system under the Constitution. To kind of exacerbate some of the issues out there, the British have now formed alliances with American Indians. Excuse me. This is contributing to tensions as American U.S. settlers are extending out into the Ohio River Valley and further into the Great Lakes. And to kind of resolve this issue for the United States is John Jay, who is the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, but he's also one of these real initial Federalist Federalist Party founders, who, one of the co-authors of the Federalist Papers in support of the Constitution. He negotiates a treaty with the British, supported by President Washington, that basically is another agreement that the British are going to remove their military bases from that area. But there's not much real follow through with this. And so the issue is on paper looking like it's going to be resolved, but in reality, we're going to push this ahead another decade or two without any resolution whatsoever. The other major force in North America that the U.S. has to deal with is the presence of the Spanish. Spanish Florida has been a thing since before the 13 colonies were a thing. And what the United States is really looking to establish more so than anything else is to get the right of deposit established at New Orleans. The Mississippi River is the western border of the United States at this point, and the port of New Orleans is at the headwaters, or where the waters empty into the Gulf of Mexico. And so the port here is going to be key. And there is some real significant progress on this for the United States, as Thomas Pinckney is going to help negotiate Pinckney's Treaty between the United States and Spain. This is going to establish the southern boundary of the United States. As you can see on the map, it is going to extend this area of Georgia all the way over to the Mississippi River line, but it's also going to give the United States the right of deposit in New Orleans. This is going to resolve everything for almost a decade until we get to, issues surrounding the Louisiana Purchase after Napoleon regains the Louisiana Territory, but more on that in the next unit. But between the diplomatic conflicts between the U.S. and the British and the Spanish, at least on paper, it looks like everything's going to be okay. But for the issues with the British, it's going to drag on just a little bit longer. So we can layer a map in on this. So when we're talking about the tensions with the British in the old Northwest Territory, we're talking here basically in the Ohio River Valley, in the modern state of Ohio. This is not just a problem based on what the British are doing, but also so far as just ongoing tensions and conflicts with American Indians. Now, according to the 1783 Treaty of Paris, that ended the Revolutionary War, there is not much of any kind of real American Indian legal claim relating to the seizure of their lands. Just like the 1763 treaty, Native American rights are not really regarded in this. And so this is kind of opening things up to have an increased level of U.S. settlement pushing further to the west into the Northwest Territory, specifically into Ohio and parts of Indiana. But Well, as a result of all this, excuse me, the Native Americans are having to evaluate their alliances and make adjustments for their own survival of things. They are adjusting their alliances with Europeans, with other Native tribes in the area, and with the United States in particular, with the overall goal of trying to limit migration of white settlers. This is going to be a difficult proposition at best because this is one of the reasons that the revolutionary process got started, was this push of westward expansion. American Indians are trying to maintain control of their tribal lands. They're trying to maintain control of the natural resources. But again, it is going to lead directly into conflict as United States settlers move into this area, and you get another conflict over, well, acquisition of resources. So what you have starting in the aftermath of the Revolutionary War and going for the better part of the next decade is what they call the Northwest Indian War, so named because it is in the Northwest Territory, like this area around the Great Lakes. It is primarily being fought in the modern state of Ohio, so on the eastern section of the Northwest Territory. The Native American tribes in this area, the Erie, the Miami, the Potawatomi, they are going to form a coalition called the Northwestern Confederacy. Remember, a confederacy is like a conglomeration, a combination of groups for one common purpose. And that purpose is to try to maintain control of their lands and the resources. But as of the Battle of Holland Timbers in 1794, you can kind of see it right here in northern Ohio, right around the city of Cleveland, actually. This is the decisive victory that concludes the fighting here and is going to lead to the Treaty of Grenville in 1795. This treaty is the end of the Northwest Indian War, but it is not an end of this conflict. It's an end of the conflict so far as it comes down into what's happening here in the 1790s. You can kind of see like this little red dotted line that's kind of like marking the line, but you can also see once you get a little bit later on, the 1810s, you can see more conflict coming up for us in the Indiana Territory and later on the Illinois Territory. This is a slow, steady progress for the United States, but really at the detriment of Native American populations. So overall, the impact from all of this, from the three treaties that we're talking about here, the Jay Treaty in 1794, Pinckney's Treaty in 1795, and the Treaty of Grenville in 1795 have really just opened up everything in this western, expanse, open it up for, well, U.S. settlers to basically flood further and further to the west. This increasing number of migrants is going to lead to new states coming into being, and you can kind of see this being labeled out on the map. Kentucky and Tennessee established in the 1790s, Ohio established by 1803, and then in the 1810s, Indiana and Illinois in the north, and Alabama and Mississippi further to the south, not to mention Louisiana in 1812. These settlers are coming both from North America, all up and down the East Coast, but they're also European settlers that are coming over because they are seeing an opportunity for, well, economic success. This economic success is going to create tensions among different population groups of the United States. So frontier cultures are going to grow. Daniel Boone is going to establish the icon of the Western frontiersman, but the Whiskey Rebellion is going to show an example of these Western frontiersmen and their ongoing sense of independence against a distant government authority. The Whiskey Rebellion as an effort to maintain your economic independence and not have to pay taxes to a distant government, this is going to ultimately fail because we're under a new federal system. Washington is going to send the U.S. Army to basically go shut this rebellion down and create a little bit of a steady tension between tidewater and backwater. Tidewater meaning the part of the country east of the Appalachians where the water is going to flow towards the coastline and the western Appalachian into, well, the Northwest Territory and the Southwest Territory, as it was termed back then. A little bit more of a, well, I guess, resistance to authority. That's kind of like an offshoot of the American independence movement in the 1770s and 80s, but it's going to stay something that's going to, well, be a systematic characteristic of the United States for decades or generations to come.